Hey y'all, I'm Leslie Hooper, and this is the Outsmart Overeating Podcast. I'm joined today by my co-host, Steph Miramontes, and we're going to spend a little time breaking down the sneaky ways that you're still overeating. Now, I know many of you that are listening have this little lie that says something along the lines of, it's only a little. In the Unstuffed program, we don't have food lists or diet rules to follow. And I think our clients find that to be a breath of fresh air. I think that's why a lot of our clients are attracted to the Unstuffed program. But there are sneaky ways that we continue to overeat with our eyes closed. So let's spend a little time today, Steph, talking about some of the ways that we want to help them open their eyes and make different decisions today. But first, is there anything that you want to mention on this topic?
It's so sneaky and so sinister. So if you're doing these things that we're about to talk about, just know, here's the thing. You're going to be like, that can't possibly be it. This is not the reason why my success is so slow or not happening. Let me just tell you, it's it. It is these things. If you feel like you are doing all the things, but you're doing these things too, this is the reason. I'm just going to say that. This is the reason.
100%. I know our listeners are going to be like, it's my age, it's my metabolism slowing down, it's my hormones. And you know what? I'm not saying that none of that is true, but I'm saying, how is that thought even helping you? Let's focus on the things you can control. And if you're frustrated, if you do feel like you've made all the changes and you're still not seeing results, then it's probably because of these little sneaky bites, licks, and tastes that are happening. These little extras that little by little aren't so little anymore, right? It's actually maybe a big part of the problem. So let's talk about number one today, eating while cooking. This one is a big one for most people. Are like, oh, I guess that's true. I do a lot of taste testing. I actually had a client email me the other day and said, what's the right amount of taste testing? I'm like, look, you know when you're bullshitting yourself, when you're tasting something and when you repetitively taste things over and over and over again. So, Steph, first thoughts on this one here?
It's such a funny question because let's be honest, most of you cook a dozen things or less. And that is being generous as fuck. If you cook more than a dozen things, good for you. But most people cook the same things over and over and over again. You know how it tastes. You know how it tastes. And so you don't need to continue to eat out of the pan. And if this is a problem for you, you'll know it by how you feel when you sit down to your meal and when you start to get a little bit full after 2 bites. And then you feel disappointed because you wanted to eat the rest of your meal. And so you go ahead and proceed to do that because of all the effort you put in to cook it, but you know you didn't need it. How do you know? Because you pre-ate. That's the problem. You pre-gamed your dinner and now we're full. The meal's not as interesting, it's not as satisfying, but it's satiating and it's filling, but you still need to stop. And so the problem is not necessarily the BLTs while cooking. It's the fact that when you sit down to eat your meal, you already had it, but then you go ahead and eat anyway.
Right. You're basically getting a twofer there because you're sitting down, you're not physically hungry, and you already ate your meal. And so it's not as enjoyable, but also you feel entitled to it because you put all the time, effort, and energy into preparing it. So you better believe you're going to dive in. All right. That one is one that I think is definitely very common amongst our listeners. So pay attention to those sneaky bites. Steph, I will say, is this where we want to introduce the bullshit bowl, or do we want to hold off on that whole philosophy?
I mean, we can. It's one that we most commonly use the bullshit bowl for, and that is basically just sitting a bowl out on your counter. And while you're cooking, any BLT that you're about to pop in your mouth, throw it in the bowl instead. And then at the end of your cooking experience, look at that and decide, do I want to have this for dinner or do I actually want my dinner? And, of course, you can always have the bullshit, whatever, but chances are pretty high and we know this, that you're going to want your actual food. And so toss all of that into a freezer bag and toss it in your freezer and do it again. Do it for an entire week and see how many extras you have over a week's time. I bet you it's multiple meals.
That visual just kind of made me gag. Just
Good.
like,
I'm just kidding. It should disgust you. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But a lot of our people are visual learners. They need to be able to see it because the brain forgets about it in an instant.
oh, for sure. That part I agree with. I'm just thinking about the freezer bag filled with like,
oh,
what
I
looks
know.
like a barf bag by the end of a week.
It is a barf. I mean, it's pretty gnarly, but it's also what you need to look. If you want to put individual baggies, you go right ahead. But like,
no, I'm on board with it. I do think it's been a really valuable exercise for many of our clients because they recognize very quickly how much they're consuming in a day, in an evening, whatever the case may be. A week, yeah, I imagine that you probably eat several meals if you are a snacker throughout the week, which, let's go ahead and talk about the snacking one a bit. Because I do think that this is pretty common. You're the kind of person who is walking past a colleague's desk and you grab a little something off, I don't know, from the break room or off their candy dish or whatever the case may be, right? Like you're just doing all these little snacky bites throughout the day, but you're not really accounting for it because it doesn't count because we're not sitting down. It's not plated. It's not like the formality of a meal. And then you don't really remember everything you ate in the day. So these kind of mindless BLTs is costing you big time. These little instances of eating add up, right? And we rarely check in with ourselves to assess how much we've eaten, what we've eaten, because again, they don't really matter. We think it's just kind of like a harmless habit because a lot of the time, Steph, and you're going to be able to relate to this, it's healthy. It's carrots, it's nuts. So like apparently those don't matter. There's no calories in carrots or nuts either. So what do you have to add to this sneaky little habit of overeating little by little by little? And it seems so harmless, but it's not.
Yeah, a little won't hurt, but it's never a little. It's a habit of having a little a lot of the time. And so now we've got a lot, and a lot does hurt, and a little isn't helping either. And when I say a little isn't helping, it's not because I think you need to be a perfect eater and have your 3 squares and never have like a little something that looks good to you. It's not that. It's just that you are reinforcing the habit of a snacker. You are reinforcing that when you see food, you eat it, regardless of checking in with yourself. And so we want to break that habit. We want to break the automation. And so, yeah, a little doesn't hurt, but it sure as shit doesn't help. And it does hurt when it's not just a little, which it never really is. Not if you're stuck.
Yeah. When I tell clients, just to put things in a perspective, 200 calories a day, that's nothing, y'all. Like, I don't know, Snickers bars, like maybe 250 or whatever. A handful of nuts could easily be 200, 250. That's a 20 to 25 pound weight gain in a year. So that's your last 20 pounds that you're really frustrated by potentially. It's just those little impulsive handfuls, those little extra bites that you're not counting, but your body definitely is. So let's move on to number 3. Then you're maybe in an environment with food pushers. Eating on the couch in front of the TV or just in passing, just those little bids for love, affection. I don't know. They're kind of a progress killer. What do you think?
Yeah. And they usually come along with this narrative of like, but it's not really fair, like this is what we always do, and my partner is still doing it. They don't even have to necessarily be food pushers. They just have to be food eaters in front of you.
Exactly.
And now all of a sudden you're just like feeling slighted, and the FOMO is adding up because it's what you used to do before. And what you're really missing is the connection, not the potato chip. And so we kind of have to dial back and peel back some layers and say, what are we really eating about here? And it's like, well, togetherness. It's like, can we figure out how to do togetherness without sabotaging your progress? Maybe. Let's see.
Okay. Yes. Agreed. Okay. Let's move on then. Number 4 is a popular one as well. And I think also one that I was guilty of is finishing those last little bites off your kids' plates when you're cleaning up the kitchen, or, being in a restaurant and, I don't know, eating the last few fries off your partner's plate. Just little instances like this. Steph, thoughts on that?
Yeah, sometimes there are people that will put their, they'll box up their meal, but somebody else at the table is still eating at a restaurant, and they're like, they're done. They felt the fullness signal. They're like, okay, cool, I'm done. And then they just start like micro grazing, just a couple bites of this or that. So that adds up. And the other thing is the one for you, one for me. I notice that a lot with people who have children and things like that. We had a client once that was talking about how her habit was one for you, one for me, because she always gave like a little bit of peanut butter, a little bit of cheese to her pups. And she was like, one for you, one for me. Didn't even consider it. She even did the bullshit bowl and did not consider that was like something that should have gone in the bullshit bowl, something that should have been like, hey, where are you at with this? And so layer by layer, little by little, you start to realize and awaken yourself to these instances of unnecessary grazing and snacking that do sabotage your progress.
Yeah, they're definitely killers. And the reality is, when you're constantly topping yourself off with those little bites, hunger doesn't have a chance to show up. You are already fed. And we all know, or probably have even been that person who says they haven't eaten anything all day, when the reality is you've been eating your ass off all day. It's just in the form of, like I said, a handful of nuts or a latte, a few bites of your kids' lunch, a handful of cereal, and an apple, but maybe a little peanut butter, whatever the case may be. But these non-meals are meals when you add them up throughout the day, the week, the month, and beyond, right? And so I think what I love about Unstuffed is you do have 3 to 4 meals a day. And that is because we want to invite hunger. We know that food is so much more enjoyable when we are hungry. When you are just taking these little nibbles and eating what I feel like is just enough food to piss you off, but you're never like truly full or satisfied because everything's just like a snack, these little mini meals. And even when I have them now, I'm just like, it still doesn't hit the spot in the same way that like sitting down and having a meal. So now I just like delay. I'm like, it's not even worth it to me to have a handful of nuts because I know it's just mindless. It's not truly satisfying. It's not going to be truly filling. Now, obviously, that's not always the case. If I'm super hungry and there is, I don't know, a dinner coming up in 2 hours, I'm not going to have a meal. I'm going to have the handful of nuts, enough to tie me over. And I think that's when instances like that are useful to your strategy. However, those should be the exception, not the norm. You should be, in my opinion, in a pretty predictable routine with your eating as much as you can. I think that's when the body tends to be pretty consistent with the hunger, and you can manage their portions pretty consistently. So it's just easier to be kind of synchronized with your body in that way and get into a good rhythm. But these little bites, licks, and tastes are enough to keep you frustrated. They are enough to keep you stuck. And so I think it's important that we just highlight that you're not broken. Your brain isn't broken. Your metabolism probably isn't broken. Your hormones probably are not broken either. But I would start with the bites, licks, and tastes and these little overeats first before we start leaping to these grand conclusions about why we're stuck.
I agree with you there. I tell clients all the time, stop Costcoing your diet. And if you don't have a Costco, it's a huge warehouse where they sell gigantic portions of everything, basically. Like you buy Hot Pockets at the store, you get a 2-pack. You buy Hot Pockets at Costco, you get a 24-pack. Okay. If you don't know what Hot Pockets are, Google it. I'm not explaining all of this to you. But when you walk through these giant warehouse, there are samples of everything. And people walk through and you have, if you think about like 20, 25 calories per sample ish, and you're having, 20 of them, you're having a meal, a whole ass meal, maybe more than one meal. And then most people are just like, okay, we've gone to Costco. Now let's grab some lunch. It's just like, you have to be able to slow this down. These things do count. As much as you don't want them to count, the reason you don't think they count is because they don't give you any satisfaction. They don't hit the spot. They are not memorable. They don't stick around as far as the mental satisfaction piece of having a sit-down meal. You don't have the eating experience that comes, the psychological eating experience that comes with having a sit-down meal when you're sampling your diet all the way through the day. And so you don't feel like you've eaten all day. Like you said, it's like, gosh, I'm just famished. I haven't eaten all day, except for all the food I ate all day that I didn't clock. I didn't register in my psyche because it's so habitual. It's so mindless. And so we need to slow that process down if you want success.
It's a great suggestion. How the hell do you do it? Obviously the way that we do it within the Unstuff framework is we do ask our clients to sit down at a table, plate their meals, and eat undistracted. And then any bites, licks, and tastes, instances of emotional eating, snacking, whatever, get documented. And we start to notice the patterns. We start to recognize the habits and bring what is subconscious to the conscious mind. Then you have an opportunity to make a different decision. And I can't even tell you how many times clients have told me they have literally had a handful of food or even had something in their mouth and then like spit it out because they're like, man, this is just so deeply ingrained. But then they catch themselves and they make a different decision. And I think that that is the beauty of recognizing where your habits are, what your opportunity for improvement is, recognizing those patterns, and then being conscious and aware enough to make a different decision by holding yourself accountable. Track them, notice them. Even just put a little tally in your phone every single time or on a piece of paper, a Post-it note, whatever on your fridge, in your kitchen. Just tally it up and see how many times it's happening. And you will see that little by little by little is no longer little. And by the way, that is a lie that you need to stop telling yourself. That you need to start telling yourself the truth. Right? You need to actually say, but what if it does matter? What if this isn't just a little? Question, push back on the narrative, the idea, the belief that this is not a problem. It is a problem. It's keeping me stuck. It's keeping me frustrated. I'm not achieving my goal. This is a habit that has created a lot of friction and disappointment in my life. Like, tell yourself the truth. I always say dieters are the best liars on the planet because we are constantly justifying reasons for our own suffering. It's like, give me a little bit more. I need this. Not holding ourselves accountable. Get back on track tomorrow. And on the narrative goes. So, Steph, that's it for me. Anything else you want to add here?
I will just say that there has never been a client that I've worked with where I was concerned about these little sneaky snacking situations that we didn't take care of it. And then that was the catalyst to see them start making changes, see them start seeing success. They focus so much on the meals, like, oh, well, I'm eating, trigger foods, and I need to cut back on my trigger foods, or I need to cut back on how much I'm eating at dinner and all of these things. And it's like, okay, maybe, but once we get the meals down to, and when I say maybe, I mean, maybe you need to eat less at dinner. It's not the trigger foods. It's not the food, knock it off. But, that's where they focus because their brain hides these little BLTs from them as insignificant, unimportant. And they're also the things that they don't want to give up because they can't possibly imagine being someone who didn't need a little something like live a little. Every time we cut them out, that's when the ball starts rolling again, every single time.
You mean it's not that they just turned 26 years old and now their metabolism is in the shitter?
Nope.
No, y'all, it is usually 100% just the things that are happening in your subconscious mind that are keeping you stuck. So that is it for us today. Hope you found this week's episode helpful. Please check us out on the next one and have a great week, y'all. Bye. I'm like,